Good morning, Encounter Church. We are so glad to see you here this morning. Excited to be able to sing praises unto our God. We would love if you would stand and worship with us. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. Yeah, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. Yeah, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my the silence steals my voice, you understand me. You understand me. Come to me in the valley of unknowns. You understand me. You understand me. You understand me, God. You understand me. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you. You're bigger than I thought you were. I believe, but help my unbelief. You understand me. You understand me. Help me reach the faith that's underneath. You understand me. You understand me. You understand me, God. You understand me. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you were. I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. Oh, I will rest. I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. I will rest in the Father's hands. Leave the rest in the Father's hands. So I throw all my cares before you. My doubts and fears don't scare you. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought. So I stop all negotiations with the God of all creation. You're bigger than I thought you were. You're bigger than I thought you were. You may be seated.
Good morning. Welcome to Encounter Church. My name is Chris Causey, and I am lead pastor here. And I'm so glad that you've chosen to come here this Sunday morning as we're wrapping up a series and a conversation that we've been in and around for the last month. And so if this is your first time, we've made those all available, but you've picked a great Sunday to step into this conversation because we've been talking about the weight of words and the power that they possess in our lives. In some ways, they're not too different from the power this thing has. This is smallpox. And smallpox was eradicated the year before I was born. So I did not grow up in a world of smallpox. But this is still, to this day, the only disease that human beings have ever fully eradicated. And it was a good one to pick because just in the 100 years prior to 1980, when it was officially fully eradicated globally, smallpox had been responsible for the death of 500 million people. Smallpox was a disease that 30% fatality rate, and if you were one of the lucky 2 of the 3 that didn't die, there was a chance of blindness and most likely permanent scars that carried through the rest of your life. So naturally, as one of the most deadliest diseases in human history, the disease that scholars believe was responsible for killing 90% of the Native American population when European colonies came over. This disease was, in 1980, decided there's only 2 places globally where any remaining samples should be kept. The CDC in Atlanta and a highly secure research lab in Russia. Only 2 places. Which is why on July 1st, 2014, there was a surprise. You see, this is not the CDC, nor is this a Russian lab. This is the National Institutes of Health campus in Maryland. And the building I want to point out specifically is this one, 29A. 29A had been filled with members of the FDA who were getting ready to shift labs to a new one. So they were doing what most labs do. They were cleaning out the closets in preparation for moving. And in one closet, some workers, as they were beginning to move boxes, noticed that one box was labeled smallpox. And when they lifted the box, the cardboard top, what they found inside of that cardboard box was 6 vials of smallpox. 2 places in the world were supposed to be, only those 2 places, because of the dangerous nature of this virus, And it was literally sitting in a closet in this building in a cardboard box. And naturally, it caused a little bit of an alarm because how you were handling a cardboard box quickly changed when what you realized was inside of it. Everybody's like, I ain't touching that. I'm not moving that box. And so members of the CDC had to come in, secure it. Then it had to be transported by plane to Atlanta. Imagine you're in that flight path that day, no clue what's flying above your head. Right? And it's just the moment for me that is so fascinating is the moment when they realized what they were holding and how it changed everything about how they held it. They weren't using gloves. They weren't using hazmat suits. There was no contained air units. But when the lid came open and they realized what they were staring at, all of a sudden, the power that they were in the midst of, the presence, the potential of what was in that vial, changed how they handled it. In the course of this month, we've been talking about words and the power they have. And there's some words in our lives that have had a special weight to them. Because words are interesting. We hear words every day, thousands, at least 10,000 words potentially for some of us in the course every day. And most of them just pass through our lives. But there's a handful of words that you and I have heard in the course of going through life every day that seem to mark us for the rest of our lives. Last week we talked about words, and they have the power to build up and break down. But I want to press into that a little bit more because there is an invisible principle at play in your life and in my life that explains why there are some words that when they land, they sit and they live there. They're the reason that for some of you, you still remember what your dad said to you when you were 12, or what that coach said to you when you were 15, or what your ex-husband said to you when you were 35. And that principle is at play in our lives, and it has shaped our lives. But because most of us walk through our lives completely unaware of how powerful this principle is, it also means that we have unintentionally, and sometimes intentionally, marked people's lives too. I mean, we say words. I mean, these are some of the words, right? I'm so proud of you. The right person saying to that, it goes so deep, doesn't it? And some of us are still living in anticipation of this being said to us. Some of us are still living in hopes that one day that special person is going to look at you and say, I'm so proud of you. That I wouldn't miss it for the world. Right? Like when you have something you're so excited and that they respond, man, nothing could keep me from seeing that moment. But there's also those kind of words. The words where in a flash, we shrink to 10 inches tall. When you looked at and you're like, you embarrassed me tonight. Or, I'm sorry, we're downsizing. You're not needed here anymore. You're like, what do you mean? I've spent the last 12 years being needed here. How does one day change that? And all of a sudden, the confidence, the security, all of the things inside of you that felt so adequate, you leave and you're not sure anymore. And then I just don't think this is going to work out. You know, we've all been there, that whole, it's not you, it's me. Let's just be friends. And you're like, no, let's be sworn enemies. And let's stay at that for a long time. And don't worry about getting your stuff. I burned it. Right? I mean, we've all been on the other side. And there's this principle that's at work in this entire thing. There's this special weight that those kind of words carry. And it's not exactly what was said. It's because there's something underneath it. It's something that Solomon wanted his son to understand. King Solomon, who was one of the wisest men who have ever lived on planet Earth, he was the third king of Israel as a nation, and he was responsible more than any other king in their history for being the reason that Israel kind of rose up in power. It wasn't too unlike what happened in the United States in the aftermath of World War II, where this sleeping industrial giant kind of woke up, and all of a sudden the U.S. began this kind of drive to where it is today of being the most powerful force militarily, the most powerful economic force in the world. There was this awakening that happened in the U.S. from the 50s all the way up to the present, where we've made progress and we've seen transformation, and we're a global leader in a lot of areas. And it's what Solomon does. He steps in and he's responsible for taking the nation of Israel, which at that point had been kind of a smaller nation who didn't have a lot of influence, but had been more influenced, to becoming this global powerhouse around 3,000 years ago. Leaders from around the world would travel to Israel to learn from Solomon. And Solomon had a responsibility. He had to prepare his children to take over for him. Like any good king, he recognized, hey, there's going to be a day where I'm not going to be the king, and son, daughter, you are going to be the face of this nation. So he writes the book of Proverbs as both a parenting manual and a preparation manual for being royalty, for being a king. And so this is why he writes these words in Proverbs 16:10. He's sitting there with his son, and he says, "The lips of a king speak as an oracle, and his mouth does not betray justice." Now, this is spoken 3,000 years ago, and it did not land for you the way it would have landed for him. Here he is, he's in this chamber, and his father, probably sitting on the throne, is giving these kind of bits of wisdom. And he gets to this one, which is clearly not just a parenting preparation. It's a king preparation moment. And so his son's like, okay, what is it? It's like the lips of a king speak as an oracle. Now, for you and I, the word oracle doesn't exactly leap out of the page. Maybe it's some vague reference to some movie you've seen. But this idea of the oracle in the ancient days would have been this almost kind of mythological, that the person, when they speak, an oracle speaks on behalf of God. Right? It's someone who is channeling a higher power with a lot more significant wisdom. And he says the lips of a king speak as an oracle, not speaks as in a sense of like, oh, you are an oracle. No, it's like, no, the way people see what comes out of your mouth is the way people see an oracle speak. He's making a comparison for a point. And for his son, who at that point would have probably been, 10 or 11, his son is having to realize this very crazy, crazy dynamic that's going to be at play for the rest of his life. That as the king, that his people are not going to have the same relationship with him that you have with your people. His father saying, look, when you show up, son, you show up differently than how they show up. When you show up, people see an oracle. People see a person whose mouth is speaking the words of God, a God. You're just going to show up as you. And you're going to miss what you bring to the table when you show up if you're not careful. Because you wake up every day and you put your robe on and you kind of go through your motions and you're just you and that's all you've ever known. But you need to realize that your people do not have the same relationship with you that you have with them. That's why when you open your mouth, they will see and hear an oracle speaking. So he's like, remember who you are. You're the future king. and what you represent to the person on the other side of you, they're going to be receiving what they will feel like is the words of God. He's like, as the king, son, your words aren't a feather, they're a brick. And that's just a heavy thing for a 10-year-old to internalize. It's a heavy thing for a one-day king to recognize. I mean, this is not too uncommon from The Lion King, right? You got young Simba, and he's like, and I just can't wait to be king. He's like, everybody look left, everybody look right. Like, he's just like, wow, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be so much fun. It's going to be awesome. I just can't wait to be king. And Mufasa, he's got the voice of an oracle, right? James Earl Jones. Woo, right? I mean, that dude could read the ingredients on a cereal box, and I'd be like, It's just not fair. Anyways, so like Mufasa's trying to prepare him for the significance and the uniqueness of who he's going to be. And he's just walking around singing, imagining the day when he's just in charge. And he just thinks his words are feathers, but they're bricks. So when he speaks, he's got weight to it. And people are going to be the ones who carry the weight of what he says. That's the weird dynamic. You speak the words as the king, you're not the one holding the bricks. They are. And so Solomon wants them to understand this very simple but powerful principle. Son, your words weigh more. It's not fair. It's just true. Your words weigh more. So you have to be way more intentional about how you use them. This is the moment condensed, because the proverb, when it was given, Solomon's teaching style, especially with his children, was to give them a little statement that wasn't always instantly understandable, because he wanted them to do the work to understand it. That's why when you start out in math in elementary school, they don't instantly hand you a calculator, right? They want you to learn how to do math before they give you the tool to help you do the math faster. And this is what he's doing. He's like, you need to learn how to think through this. You need to come to this insight, because like any of us have discovered, we like and value the insights we come to better than the ones that other people came to. And that's the reason I know that's true, is that for many of us, we have overspent. We have made mistakes that our parents told us if we just ignore this and we don't do this and we don't say this, our lives will be so much better. And did we listen to them? No, because they were old and they were stupid and they had no clue. And then fast forward a couple decades later, and now you're like, to your children or to anyone who will listen, you need to know this. This is important. And so Solomon understands, look, you're going to value your insights more than you're going to value mine. So I'm going to give you a proverb that you have to come. I've fast forwarded it because we have a 3,000-year gap, and the things bouncing around in his son's head's not going to be bouncing around in yours to unlock it. And so this is what he's saying to his son. Your words weigh more. Fact. So you have to be way more intentional in how you use them. So there's this interesting phrase that is a running joke in our household now. That was unexpected. The reason this phrase came into our household was not originally so funny. When Ella was in kindergarten, there was a moment with her and Jenny where Ella did kind of this silly thing, and Jenny looked at Ella and was like, wow, that was unexpected. And my daughter kind of got deer headlights and then busted out crying. And we were like, what just happened? And she was so upset. I mean, like, you know, like your doll's melted in a fire, kind of, you're not going to Disney World like you thought, like my world is collapsing, upset. And Jenny was like, sweetie, time out, like what just happened? Like it wasn't correction. It was just she was being silly. It was like, oh, that's unexpected. And it's like, you know. And as Jenny started to ask her questions, she realized that the reason that landed so weird was because this word in her school system is the word used to positively redirect students. So when a student is not exhibiting the expectations in the classroom that you desire, instead of being like, when I was growing up, where it was a little bit scarier in the response, the teacher would just look at you and say, well, that's unexpected. And it was a phrase that became even funnier when Jenny and I would start to volunteer in my daughter's school, and we were in the classroom, and we'd hear the teacher, after we'd been it every single week or every other week, hear the teacher say that same phrase to that same kid every single week, and you're just in your head, and you're like, no, it's not unexpected. I actually come today expecting that kid to do that. Why do you keep getting surprised by it? But it was, for them, it was a mechanism of trying to redirect the kid. And so for my daughter, this phrase was loaded with all this negativity. And so when my wife said, that is unexpected, the full weight of those bricks came crushing down on her. You see, what is true about a king is also true about you and me. Now, it may not be a nation. It may not be a people that we oversee, that our words land differently with. But reality is your children, they also don't have the same relationship with you that you have with them. And most of us never think about that. We just think they're little yous or little versions of they're just little humans. But they're not your bros. They're not your girlfriends. They're your children. And any of you who've spent time long enough with them, especially like in my household, where when you speak, there's a weight that you have. There's an authority that you carry. They don't see us the way we see them because there's a power dynamic that skews it. I mean, I see this all the time. When I say something and they don't like it, I quickly realize the power dynamic because they're like, oh, you're just the assistant to the regional director. They're like, I'm going to go ask mom. I mean, it's the equivalent of like being at the hotel and you're like, can I speak to your manager? Right? I mean, but even that, they understand the power dynamic. It's present every single day. And your kids don't have the same relationship. Your students, if you're a teacher or a principal, an educator, a coach, your students do not have the same relationship with you that you have with them. When you show up, you bring a different you than how you perceive you. And if you're a boss, and some of you, this explains why, if you've ever experienced being a part of a team and being promoted to lead a team, this explains why they don't invite you to happy hour anymore. This is why when all of a sudden you showed up the next day and your jokes were funnier. They never laughed before, but now they think you're funny. And you're not funny. You're just now their boss. So they have to laugh at you when you say something. And it's ridiculous. And it's not fair, but it's true about you. Your employees don't have the same relationship with you that you have with them because you now control their future. You now influence their paycheck. You now have influence that spreads into their spouse and their kids and their dreams and their vacations. You influence all of that. And if you're in the medical field, you get this. Your patients, they don't have the relationship with you that you have with them. You think you're just a regular human being walking through the door, and they literally see the Grim Reaper. Or they see someone who has a knowledge that's either going to unlock something for them for good, or is going to unlock something that's terrifying. I mean, if we could hook people up to monitors like some of you actually do, but we did it all the time. When you walk in the room, you actually change their vitals because there's a power that you have when you walk into the room. And what Solomon was saying about a son is not just true about a son and a king, it's true about all of us with some ones in our lives. And so the question I think that we all have to hit pause and ask ourselves is, who do our words carry extra weight with? Because you've been you your entire life. You feel like you, your words feel like the same. You can make jokes, you can do stupid things, you can say stupid things. And, like, you've just been you, living it out for decades for some of us. And we never realize that what people experience on the other side of you is different than what you experience. And this dynamic is present every day in our lives, and this dynamic is powerful. And it's really important for us to hit pause and say, who do your words carry extra weight with? Like, as a pastor, this was one of the scariest things I realized pretty early on in ministry. Like, I don't think I have that great of insight. I don't take myself very seriously. Like, one, I think I'm really funny. And I think I'm hilarious. And I go through the course of my life every day, and I'm doing run jokes, and like, ha, 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 that's funny. And nobody was here to hear that, but if they had, they would have laughed. And so I'm just me. And I'm not too far off from like 13-year-old husky version of me. It's always been me. But then when I stepped into being a pastor, and it's like the Reverend Dr. Brian Causey. And like for me, it's just like, hey, what's up? And they're like, they hear, how art thou? Brethren, this is the Reverend Doctor, and I have come from on high to deliver words from God. God. I had to go into conversations with people starting to like tune myself to the realization that my words sound like this to me, but to them it sounds like, thou shalt not. And so now, if you've ever been on the other side of me and it's a moment where maybe we're pressing into something heavy or deep, or you're asking profound life advice, and I'm starting to feel the weight shift and the dynamic, you're going to hear me say, and some of you have heard me say, hey, let me be really clear. I want to use a wordplay here. I am not a prophet, a P-R-O-P-H-E-T. Okay, I am not a thus says the Lord. Like, he doesn't send me emails or text messages. Hey, I know you're walking into that meeting. Can you make sure they know this? Like, I don't get that. So I have to be like, hey, I'm a nonprofit. And in fact, I lead a nonprofit. So I'm doubly nonprofit. So what I'm about to say to you is coming from a middle-aged, bald-headed man who needs to work out more, who doesn't have life figured out, and who still shops at Target sometimes for his clothes, okay? So let's just like recalibrate. No loss for the Target love, okay? I'm just saying, that's just me. Like, I'm showing up, and this is what you get. This is not God. This is not from him. This is like, I'm going to the same Bible I want to encourage you to go to. But I've recognized, because over the years as a pastor, I would see words I would say and they landed differently. And I was like, oh my goodness. I think for some people, as a pastor, I have more weight than I realize. And for some of you, this is something that can transform the relationships in your lives. Because there is a group of people that when you speak, it has a different weight to it. That for some of us, when we think about those people, we need to remember who we are and what we represent to the person on the other side. And this is crazy. Like, this is wild. But there are some people on the other side of you who your words, you saying phrases, are going to be the only people who can ever say those phrases and it means something to them. It's not fair. It's just fact. I mean, the craziest dynamic ever. I remember, I've shared a little bit of the backdrop of my father and my whole story. I've only had 2 communications with him my entire life. And the second one was an email. And as a college student, I remember my dorm room. I remember my chair. I remember my, what I thought was my Pentium compact, CPU that was blazing. I remember I remember the sounds of AOL. I remember it all. And then reading the words from him to me, a person he had never met, might add. I tried to hold out an olive branch to you, and you rejected it. And I'm like, I remember that email hitting me so hard. And I'm like, I have never met this man. He could walk into this room right now, and I would absolutely have no clue who he is. No clue. A man I had never met could say a sentence in an email that landed in me the way other statements similar have never landed. It's not fair that man has that much power in my life. But it doesn't matter. It's fact because he's my father. And you and I can spit in the wind against this principle, but the reality is it will always win. And as soon as you and I lean into this power dynamic present in our lives, it will start to transform us and the relationships around us. Because some of us, we have words that we can speak, and we're the only ones who can speak it. And if you let time pass without saying those words, the other person on the other side of you may never get past that. That what we say, how we say, when we say it, man, it's all there. And it's heavy. And for those people who are on your short list and who are on my short list, we have to make sure that we recognize for them our words way more. And we've got to be way more intentional. And I want to give you 2 areas just real quick where I think these 2 dynamics, these are two different situations where this dynamic often derails us. If there's going to be a negative, this is where the negative most shows up. One is in our reactions. When in a short moment, frustrated, maybe we didn't sleep that well, maybe it doesn't have anything to do with them, it's a bunch of other things in us showing up. It's hard. It's the work day we had. It's the tension relationally that we have with someone else. And then our kid says something. And we react. And in a moment, it was just, so stupid. I shouldn't have said that. But we said, that's stupid. Or why can't you ever get this right? Or why can't you just listen to me? Why can't you be like your brother? Why can't you just be more like your sister? And it's a reaction. We're responding in a moment. But because our words weigh more, they land harder. And this is one for us. If there's ditches where you and I are going to mess this up, it's in this. And if there's one area where I'm really going to mess it up, it's in our jokes. Because I told you, I think I'm hilarious. And I regularly like to demonstrate my hilariousness to my children. Okay? So I'm watching something, and it's run of commentary on a show, and they're like dramatic, and everyone's got a, it's like, have you noticed, this is just side note, like I watch TV shows with my little girl, and I'm like, why are all these shows like The Little Bachelor? It's like everybody's got a crush, and they're up the sideways with this person, and it's just, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, my goodness, she's being so dramatic, and Ella's like, Or I'm like, didn't she have a crush last week on him? Like, what's up with that? Like, why? I mean, look at his hair anyways. Like, why would she even have a crush? And, and like, she would laugh. And it was like, oh, that's funny. Ha, ha, ha. And of course, like any self-respecting male who thinks he's funny, if you laugh at my jokes, it means I am funny and I should be funnier. Okay? This is from my son who gets it as a 4-year-old. It comes from me. So I dial it up, not dial it down. So by the end of it, you might as well hand me a microphone, give me a spotlight, and I'm like, hey, did you see that episode? I mean, because I'm full out in that mode at that point. And a few weeks ago, I referenced this moment last week, but I didn't tell you what was going on with my daughter, where my wife said, hey, like 9:30 one night about a month ago, she was like, hey, I know you think you're funny. It's like, no, there's no I think. Let me just be clear. I am funny. She's like, okay. Well, here's the thing. I think you think your daughter thinks you're funnier than you actually are. And I'm like, please say more. And because this is not true. And because my daughter actually regularly tells me, Daddy, you're really funny. You're a funny daddy. And I'm like, thank you. Can you please say that again? Let me record it. Anyways, because my wife doesn't think so. So she's like, so you've been making a lot of jokes around this whole drama thing and the crush thing and the relationship, the little bachelorette that you guys been watching on whatever that was on Nickelodeon or Disney or whatever. I don't even know. She's like, Ella doesn't think that's funny. I'm like, what? See, she doesn't want to talk to you about having a crush. She wouldn't want to talk to you about relationship stuff because every time you talk about it, it's always in the context of being funny, and you don't realize it, but you're picking on the people on the television. And so in the moments where she feels like she's one of those people on the television, she automatically assumes that when you open your mouth, that's how you're going to treat her. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, no clue. I mean, if you had polled me, I'd be like, oh man, we are awesome. Like, I'm so good. I'm killing it in the dad thing. We're sitting there, we're bonding, and I'm making her laugh. And I think I'm building a bridge with the bricks coming out of my mouth. And what I'm actually doing is I'm building a wall. Like, that was terrifying for me. And it was just me being funny, being goofy, being me. But me on the other side of her is not how she sees me. I show up different to her than I show up to anyone else. And so our reaction, our jokes, if you're wanting to like lean into this a little bit and say, okay, well, how do I start to recalibrate? Because maybe I need to recalibrate some things. These are 2 great starting points. Because chances are, I'm not going to say this is for everybody, but chances are if you did an inventory of words that were said to you that still reverberate inside of your head today, there is a more than likely chance that those words were spoken in a moment that was a reaction, or they were spoken in a moment that they would have said was just them being funny. Why are you being so serious? It may have been a group of middle school or high school students when you were a middle school and high school student, and they thought they were being funny because everyone else was laughing, but you were dying on the inside. Because the way those words were landing in you was not how it was landing in them. And so, this dynamic is showing up in our lives too. We're giving it, not just receiving it. And to kind of let it just, can I just say this? Let that sit. It's a lot of pressure. Like some of you are like, man, if I had known this was what I was signing up for as a parent, I don't know I'd have signed up for that. If this was what I was signing up for when I signed up to be a leader or a boss, I'm not sure I would have been as excited about that. No one ever told me that when I stepped into this role, that what would roll off my tongue would sound like an oracle to others. And I saw a piece of advice from this morning. It was like a collection of different services, and they'd interviewed top individuals in those fields, and they're like, what advice would you give people? And one of them was a doctor. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Wasn't looking for it, just happened to be there. And he says, as a doctor, one of my default pieces of advice to patients is like, you're free to get a second opinion. I have what I think is an educated opinion, but at the end of the day, I only have so much view. You know you better than me. And I was like, but it was it was a doctor who, without me having a conversation, recognized that when he showed up in the room with the patient, he spoke as if he was an oracle, or she spoke as if she was a god. He's like, take me down. And this is a lot of pressure. I mean, this is heavy. But this principle is going to play out in our lives, regardless of whether we acknowledge it or not. And I don't know about you, but my past has generated enough examples that I know this principle is true. And I want for my next generation, for the people downstream of my words, to encounter someone who saw their power and leveraged them for good. This is why I think Solomon ended this passage, ended this proverb with the son with saying, "And his mouth does not betray justice." He gives all of this heaviness, but then he lands the statement with, "But there is so much potential power for good." Yes, son, people will hear an oracle, but what you actually have the power to do is to bring order, to bring justice, to make the wrongs right. Someone who's walked in limping has, because of your words, the ability to walk out leaping. You can lift people up with your words, son. There is a lot of pressure, but there is a holy privilege that you and I have with a handful of people in our lives, that when we speak, something can happen for good. And that, imagine if this was a room, or recently the 2x the number of people in this room who listen online. What if we as a group of people started to lean in, and instead of cursing the words that have been spoken that has damaged us, become people who start to commit to say, you know what, there are a handful of people in the course of my life who my words are going to weigh more. And I am going to be way more intentional with those people with my words. And I'm going to recognize the privilege and potential, because there is someone who can be unleashed. There is a life that can be transformed. There is someone in your workspace that you lead right now who could become a whole different employee because of the words that you speak to them. Your children have the ability to fly higher than you ever flew. Like, there's so much potential that you and I have. And we just have to commit to recognizing, man, our words way more. So we've got to be way more intentional. And the image I want to leave you as we wrap up is just this: sweat cement. This is this image that's forever stuck with me when it comes to my children, when it comes to this church and opportunities I have to lead people as a pastor. Every moment I've ever fired someone, you probably don't think about me as that, but I've had to fire people like you have. And every moment I've had to fire someone, I think about this moment. The words I'm going to say are going to stick. And I want to make sure that what I say, I'm okay with it saying that. And that it's going to bring life to them. So these are in the hard moments, just like they are in the lighthearted moments. But you and I, because our words weigh more, we have to be way more intentional. And so for some of you who are like, okay, I want to next level this thing. If you're doing journaling, you're doing writing, take a short list this week. Write down the names of the people who in your life, your words weigh more. And just draw a little wet cement block, a little square, and say, what do I want to make sure I leave behind in their lives? What do I want to make sure is pressed into them? Like, if you really want to get serious about it, that exercise will start to give you guidance and direction and how you leverage the words that are coming out your mouth. Because there is a weight to your words, and there's a weight to mine. And so let's use them wisely. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the privilege that we have and being able to speak words and to speak life. God, thank you that there is forgiveness that you generously extend over us. And I recognize that even in the message, there is a weightiness to this truth. And that this isn't theoretical, that this is a truth hitting us midstream. And so, Father, I just want to pray for just a few people who, for whatever reason, I feel like this probably landed with them. And it's really hard for them to see the potential because all they can feel is the pain. All they can feel is the weight of the words they've spoken or the words that have been spoken to them and over them. And I pray that in this moment, that you would just bring peace, that they would find that you're a God who forgives, who is gracious when they just look up to heaven and say, Jesus, I'm sorry. Help me to speak better words. And I pray that for some of us who are just kind of sitting in that place of pain, that we would start to experience your peace. And for all of us, God, that this would be a moment that marks us, that stirs us, and that we would move into the lives of people who our words weigh more, with a lot more intentionality. And it's in your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen. So, I was praying over somebody, because I know, even my wife, I actually go through this message every message I go through before I ever get up here, because this is a lot of pressure for me and public speaking, and I always want to make sure that I honor your time and honor God and what he's called me to do. And my wife looked at me last night when I went through it with her. She was like, man, this is so heavy. And I was like, I know. It's not fair. And there's this, and if that's all there was, I think it would almost be too crushing. But as people who follow Christ, I think there's actually this beautiful thing God does for us, and that he gives us his Spirit. But he's also, the way that we step into Christianity is to acknowledge we're not perfect, that we haven't figured it out. I mean, if somebody's like, what does it mean to be a Christian? It's not what the New York Times wants to say about Christians. It's not what, clickbait wants to say about Christians. What makes a Christian is not their political view. What makes a Christian is not any of the yard signs. What makes a Christian is someone who is acknowledged at the foot of the cross and what Jesus Christ did and who he was, that what he did was for you and me in our brokenness. And that when we bend our knees and we acknowledge our frailty, our weakness, our brokenness, our sin, then when we stand up from that cross, there is no air of perfection. There is no air of self-righteousness, because we know how much of a hot mess we really are. That's what it means to be a Christian. So in the moments when we realize the words coming out of our mouth and we can't catch them to get them back in, we can't repair the dent, but we can at least start to repair the relationship. We can say, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I was reacting to something that happened earlier today that was not meant for you, and I know that landed hard. I was wrong. Please forgive me. We can say those words that bring life, that can start to bring repair. But even better than all of that is a God who has said certain words over us. And we want to end today with a song that's just a statement and a declaration about the words that God has said. It's a song called You Say. And it really is just, it's the beauty of God coming into our lives and breaking up the concrete of things that have been said over us that are lies. And Him pouring a fresh foundation in our lives that says you are loved, you are wanted. It's just words that transform us in grace. And so I want to invite you to stand. And I want to give you permission to let these words pour over you, not as words of a song, but to lean in and to listen as this is the echo from heaven. This is heaven's words to you and to me, and the grace of God that He extends to us. Let's sing.
I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Again, just who I am, because I need to know. Ooh, oh, you see I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You see I am strong when I think I am weak. And you see I am held when I am falling short. And when I don't belong,
So walk in that, live in that. You matter, you're valuable, you have a purpose, and you are absolutely loved just the way you are. God says so. So let the words go that others have spoke over you, and just know that you are loved by God. So we are starting our student ministry in a couple weeks, student group. If you are a middle schooler, we have some really, really excited things planned for the fall and moving forward. Fun things, good things. And we're going to kick it all off today. At my house, we're having a party. There's going to be swimming. There's going to be food. I'm cooking. I am by far the best cook in the room. So if you're interested, if you're a middle schooler or high schooler, you can drop them off. You can stay with them, whatever you want. Just talk to me afterwards, and I'll give you my address. I don't want to give it out online, but we can chat afterwards. We're going to pick up student ministry groups in a couple weeks. We're working on the time. We want to make sure we have a time that works for most and for everyone. On top of that, we're going to have some really fun events that we want to invite friends to. We really, really want to start to impact the next generation and let kids know how valuable, and let students know how valuable and how loved they are, just the way they are. So that's big things coming up. If you're new to the church, Chris would love to meet you. He's going to be out in the lobby. Stop by and say hi. He has a gift for you. And we just really thank you for coming today, and look forward to seeing you back next week on Labor Day weekend as we start a new series. Take care, and God bless.